Something just shifted in the way the Pittsburgh Steelers are being projected to build this roster heading into the 2026 season. And when you really break down this latest mock draft scenario, it starts to reveal a very clear philosophy behind what this team could be trying to accomplish. This is not just about adding talent, it's about building a very specific identity, and every single move here connects to that bigger picture. Let's start with the first aggressive decision because it comes even before the draft begins. The idea of trading for Marvin Mims Jr. is not just a random addition, it's a calculated move to inject speed, explosiveness, and versatility into a wide receiver room that already has size and physicality. By only moving down 9 spots in the 5th round, the cost is minimal, but the potential impact is significant. Mims brings vertical speed, the ability to stretch the field, and immediate special teams value as a returner. That alone already hints at a front office that is looking for efficiency, low risk, high upside additions that fill very specific roles. Now, when you shift to the first round pick at 21, this is where things get really interesting. Instead of going with the more flashy wide receiver option, the decision here is to go into the trenches with Wenger Iwane, a guard out of Penn State, and this is where you can clearly see a pattern forming. The Steelers have not addressed the left guard position in free agency, and this pick feels like a direct response to that gap. Iwane is not just filling a need, he's potentially stepping in as a day one starter with elite pass blocking ability and the kind of physical presence that fits perfectly with what this organization has historically valued. There's also a deeper layer here. The trend of prioritizing trench players early continues, reinforcing the idea that this team wants to build from the inside out. That's not just philosophy, that's strategy. You protect your quarterback, you establish your run game, and you control the tempo of the game. That's exactly what this move represents. But then comes the aggressive swing. Trading up to pick 44 changes everything about the direction of this draft. Packaging multiple picks to go up and secure Zachariah Branch shows urgency. This is not a passive approach. This is a team identifying a specific offensive weapon and making sure they get him. Branch brings something that this offense is currently missing: a true separation ability, explosive speed from the slot, and the kind of dynamic playmaking that can turn short passes into big gains. What stands out here is how well this complements the current receiver group. You already have size and possession ability, but what you don't have consistently is that sudden burst, that unpredictability. Branch fills that gap immediately, and even with concerns about his hands, the upside is undeniable. Especially if the quarterback situation remains stable, having a player who can create instant separation becomes even more valuable. Moving into the 3rd round, the focus shifts toward versatility and depth. Traden Stokes comes in as a defensive back with size and athleticism, someone who can play multiple roles in the secondary. This isn't just about immediate impact, it's about planning for the future. There's a clear understanding here that certain positions will need to be reloaded over time, and Stokes fits that long-term vision perfectly. Then doubling down at wide receiver again with Ted Hurst adds another layer to this strategy. This is a developmental piece, someone with raw talent and big playability who doesn't need to start right away. The comparison in play style suggests a deep threat profile, someone who can grow into a bigger role over time. And that's the key here. Not every pick is about instant production. Some are about building the next wave of contributors. As you start to look at these moves together, a pattern becomes impossible to ignore. There's a balance between immediate needs and future planning. There's aggression when it comes to acquiring specific skill sets, but also patience in developing talent behind the scenes. And most importantly, there's a clear emphasis on adding speed, versatility, and physicality across the roster. This isn't a random collection of picks. This is a blueprint. It's a team trying to become more explosive on offense, more flexible on defense, and more complete overall. The question now becomes how realistic this approach is and whether these specific moves actually align with what the Steelers will do when the draft arrives. So let me ask you this: if you're a Steelers fan looking at this entire strategy, the trade for Mims, the focus on the trenches early, and then the aggressive move up for a playmaker like Branch, do you think this is the right direction for the team, or would you rather see a completely different approach? And when you carry this approach into day 3, that same philosophy doesn't disappear. It actually becomes becomes even more clear. The Steelers aren't just throwing darts late in the draft, they're still targeting very specific traits, very specific roles, and trying to build layers of depth that can develop over time without immediate pressure. The move to trade up to the very first pick of the 4th round, number 101, is another example of controlled aggression. Instead of sitting back and letting the board come to them, they packaged 2 4th-round picks to go get a player they clearly value. Marquil Bell, the left tackle out of Miami, fits that mold of a high-upside developmental lineman. At 6'9" with a massive frame and long reach, he's not a polished product yet, but you're betting on traits. And that's something this front office seems very comfortable doing. What makes this move even more interesting is the situation it creates in the offensive line room. You're not forcing Bell to start right away. You already have competition there, and that's the key. This becomes about creating an environment where the best player wins the job. If Bell develops faster than expected, you might have your long-term answer. If not, you still have depth and flexibility. It's a low-pressure, high-upside scenario that fits perfectly with a team trying to build sustainably. Then in the 5th round, the focus shifts to tight end depth with Oscar Delp, and this is one of those moves that might not get a lot of attention, but it matters more than people think. Behind Pat Freiermuth and Darnell Washington, there isn't much proven depth. Delp gives you a receiving option who can step in if needed without forcing you to completely change your offensive structure. That kind of insurance is crucial over a long NFL season. When you get into the 7th round, this is where you really start to see the front office taking calculated shots. Keshawn Elliott at linebacker is all about athletic upside. He's not expected to contribute immediately, but there's a clear plan here, with potential changes coming in the linebacker room in the future. Bringing in a player who can develop for a year and then step into a rotational role makes a lot of sense. Bishop Fitzgerald at safety continues that theme of versatility and size in the secondary. A bigger body who can potentially play multiple roles, whether that's as depth at safety or even contributing in sub packages. Again, it's about giving the coaching staff options, not locking them into one rigid structure. And then there's the quarterback pick, Baron Morton. This is where things get really intriguing. Taking a quarterback in the 7th round is always a low-risk move, but the reasoning behind it matters. Morton dealt with adversity, played through injury, and still showed flashes of strong mechanics, quick release, and the ability to go through progressions. This isn't about finding an immediate starter. It's about bringing in competition, someone who can push the room and maybe develop into something more over time. When you zoom out and look at the entire class, it tells a very complete story. You added a veteran receiver with speed. You reinforced the offensive line with a potential plug-and-play guard and a developmental tackle. You injected explosiveness into the offense with Branch. You added depth and versatility to the defense. And you took smart, low-risk swings late in the draft. This is what a balanced roster-building strategy looks like. It's not overly dependent on one position, it doesn't ignore long-term needs, and it creates competition across multiple areas of the team, and maybe more importantly, it aligns with a clear identity: physical in the trenches, explosive on offense, and flexible on defense. Now it comes down to you. Looking at this entire mock draft from start to finish, including the trades, the aggressive moves up the board, and the focus on both immediate impact and future development, how would you grade this class for the Pittsburgh Steelers? And the more you sit with this entire scenario, the more you start to realize that it's not just about individual players, it's about how all these pieces could realistically fit together once this team steps onto the field. Think about the offensive identity this creates. You potentially come out of this offseason with a reinforced interior offensive line thanks to Wenger Iwane, giving you more stability in pass protection and more push in the run game. That alone changes the way this offense can operate on early downs. Then you layer in speed with Marvin Mims Jr. and Zachariah Branch, and suddenly this isn't just a physical offense anymore, it's unpredictable. You have players who can take the top off a defense, players who can create yards after the catch, and players who force defenses to respect every inch of the field. That combination is what makes offenses dangerous. Not just talent, but contrast. Size and physicality mixed with speed and explosiveness. That's how you keep defenses guessing, and that's exactly what this approach seems designed to do. Now flip over to the defensive side, and it's a similar story. You're not necessarily adding immediate stars, but you're adding flexibility flexibility. Traden Stokes and Bishop Fitzgerald give you options in the secondary, especially in sub-packages where the modern NFL game is often decided. You're preparing for the future while still giving yourself depth in the present. And with Keshaun Elliott, you're taking a long-term view at linebacker, understanding that roster turnover is inevitable and planning ahead for it. Even the quarterback move with Baron Morton fits into this bigger picture. It's not about replacing anyone right now. It's about keeping the pipeline going. It's about always having someone developing, someone learning, someone ready to step in if needed or become an asset down the line. That's how stable organizations operate, and that's what this feels like. A focus on sustainability, not just short-term fixes. But here's where it gets really interesting. All of this only works if the development hits. Drafting for upside is powerful, but it comes with risk. If players like Branch refine their weaknesses, if Bell reaches his potential, if Morton proves to be more than just a late-round flyer, then this class could look like a home run in hindsight. But if those developments stall, then suddenly the aggressive moves, especially trading up, get questioned. That's the reality of the draft. It's not just about the plan, it's about execution. And that's why this entire mock draft sparks such a strong reaction, because you can clearly see the vision, you can understand what the Steelers would be trying to build. The real debate is whether this is the right vision to chase, because at the end of the day, that's really what this entire conversation comes down to. Not just who the Steelers might draft, not just the trades, but what kind of team they are trying to become in a league that is constantly evolving. You can see the contrast very clearly. For years, the Steelers have leaned heavily on physical football, controlling the line of scrimmage, winning with defense, and relying on structure. That identity isn't gone here. It's still present with picks like Wenger Iwane and the continued investment in the trenches. But now there's an added layer, and it's impossible to ignore. Speed, separation, and offensive creativity are being prioritized in a way that feels more modern, more aligned with where the league is heading, and that balance is difficult to achieve. It's easy to say you want to be physical and explosive, but building a roster that can consistently do both requires precision. Every role matters. Every player has to fit not just individually, but within the system. That's why moves like adding Marvin Mims Jr. or trading up for Zachariah Branch stand out so much. They're not just talented players, they're specific solutions to very clear problems. You needed more juice on offense. You needed players who can win quickly, who can create space, who can turn short plays into big ones. And at the same time, you couldn't afford to neglect protection, which is why reinforcing the offensive line early becomes such a critical part of the plan. It all connects. Then when you look at the depth additions, the late round picks, that's where the long-term vision really shows itself. You're not drafting just for September, you're drafting for the next 2 or 3 years. You're preparing for contracts to expire, for veterans to move on, for injuries that you can't predict. That's how you avoid having to rebuild from scratch. That's how you stay competitive year after year. But there's another layer to this that fans always pick up on, and it's the level of aggression. This isn't a passive draft, trading up multiple times, targeting specific players, taking swings on upside. That sends a message. It tells you that this front office isn't just trying to fill holes. They're trying to actively shape the roster into something new, and that's where opinions start to split. Some fans will love this approach. They'll see the upside, the excitement, the potential for this offense to become something dynamic and difficult to defend. Others might look at it and worry about the risks, about passing on safer options, about whether these projections will actually translate to the NFL level. Both sides are valid because the truth is, this kind of strategy can go in